What if the face you've seen in every museum book, every documentary, every textbook photo of ancient Egypt wasn't actually King Tut's? King Tut's mask is the most recognizable face in human history. Millions of people have seen it. Almost none of them have ever questioned it. For a century, it's been treated as a finished story, sealed behind glass, accepted without debate. But right now, there's a video circulating online claiming that a quantum imaging scan just tore that story apart. That a hidden secret was found buried under the gold. That Egyptology was left reeling. That I wanted to know what that scan actually found. So I looked for it. Here's where it gets strange. I couldn't find it. Not the scan. Not the researchers who supposedly ran it. Not a single credible source describing what quantum imaging even means in this context. What I did find were dozens of videos, across dozens of channels, telling the exact same story, using the exact same phrase, with only the ending word changed. Shocked, stunned, terrified, exposed. Same claim, same lack of evidence. Copied, over and over, until it started to look true simply because so many people were repeating it. That's usually the moment a story stops being information and starts being noise. So I decided to ignore the viral version completely and find out what's actually been documented about this mask. And it turns out, the real story doesn't need a fake scanner to be interesting. It's been sitting in academic papers for nearly a decade, mostly ignored by the algorithm, because it's careful instead of dramatic. It starts in 1925, when Howard Carter first lifted this mask out of Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings. For generations, it was simply the boy king's mask. Nobody questioned who it was made for. Why would they? It was found on his mummy. Except that's not the full picture. In 2015, a British Egyptologist named Nicholas Reeves published something that quietly unsettled that assumption. He argued that this mask wasn't originally made for Tutankhamun at all. He believed it had been made for someone else entirely, a female pharaoh who ruled shortly before him, most likely his stepmother, the woman history remembers as Nefertiti. That's not a small claim. So what was it actually based on? First, the ears. King Tut's mask has pierced ears, a detail that, in that era, showed up almost exclusively on depictions of women and children, never on adult male pharaohs. On its own, maybe a coincidence. But it was the first thread Reeves pulled. But none of that was the strangest discovery. Because when researchers measured the gold alloy of the mask, they found something odd. The face is 23.2 karat gold. The rest of the mask, the headdress, the collar, is 23.5 karat. A small difference, but a real, measurable one. The kind of difference you'd expect if the face wasn't made at the same time, by the same hands, as the rest of the piece. And then there was a third detail, the one that convinced a lot of skeptical researchers to at least take the theory seriously. Soldering. Physical, visible soldering marks around the face, consistent with a separate piece of gold having been fused onto an existing mask. Not damage, not decay, a deliberate modification. Put those three things together, and you get a picture that's very different from a mask made for a boy king. You get a mask that may have started its life as something else entirely, and was altered to fit a different face. In 2025, a researcher from the University of York, Joanne Fletcher, revisited this evidence and reached a striking conclusion of her own. She described it plainly. It looked as if Tutankhamun's face had been grafted onto the mask of a previous ruler. Her words, not mine. And she went further, suggesting the mask may have belonged specifically to Nefertiti, whose tomb, to this day, has never been found. Sit with that for a second. If she's right, part of what people are looking at when they see this famous golden face isn't just Tutankhamun. It's the leftover shell of a woman whose burial was never completed, and whose final resting place remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in Egyptology. That's not a fabricated quantum scan. That's real, published, academic work. And it's far stranger than anything the viral version invented. At this point, it might feel like the mystery's basically solved. Reassigned mask, forgotten queen, case closed. Except this theory has one major problem almost nobody mentions. Not everyone agrees with Reeves and Fletcher. And this channel isn't in the business of only telling you the parts that sound exciting. Back in 2015, a conservator named Christian Ekman examined the same two-part construction Reeves pointed to, and came to a very different conclusion. He argued that building a mask in separate pieces, face and headdress, was simply normal practice in that era. Not evidence of reuse, just how it was made. And there's another problem for the reuse theory. An Egyptology writer named Bassam al-Shama has pointed out that the mask itself carries hieroglyphic text on its back, a spell meant to guide the deceased into the afterlife. That text references names directly associated with Tutankhamun. If the mask had truly been repurposed from someone else's burial, you'd expect at least some trace of that person's identity to remain somewhere on it. Instead, the inscriptions point back to him. So which is it? Was this mask quietly reassigned from a forgotten queen to a teenage king who died too suddenly for his own burial to be finished in time? Or is that entire theory built on a coincidence of manufacturing technique that modern eyes are reading far too much into? Honestly, I don't think that question has a clean answer yet. And I'd rather tell you that clearly than pretend a fake quantum scanner solved it for you in 3 minutes. Here's what I think the real lie is. Not a hidden name flashing under a scanner. Not some buried secret Egyptology was too afraid to admit. The lie is smaller, and somehow more human than that. It's the quiet assumption, repeated for 100 years, that this mask was always meant for him. That nothing about this tomb was improvised. That everything we see was planned exactly the way it looks. Tutankhamun died around 19 years old, likely from a combination of malaria and a badly infected broken leg. Whatever the cause, it came fast. Too fast for a proper royal burial to be built from scratch. So if Reeves and Fletcher are right, what happened next wasn't some elaborate deception. It was practical. Somewhere in the palace, there may have been a nearly finished mask, made for a queen who never got the burial she was promised. And when a young king needed one urgently, that unfinished legacy may have quietly become his. Think about what that actually means. Somewhere, right now, in a glass case in Cairo, millions of people every year stand in front of that mask believing they're looking at one king. And history quietly whispers that they might also be looking at the leftover face of a forgotten queen, a woman powerful enough to rule Egypt, and yet erased so completely that we still don't even know where she's buried. That's the real ending to the quantum scan story, by the way. It never existed. There was no scanner, no dramatic reveal, no secret hidden name flashing on a screen. But the real evidence, the ears, the gold, the solder, the decade of academic argument that followed, turned out to be far more fascinating than anything that fabricated version ever claimed. Oh, you think Nicholas Reeves and Joanne Fletcher are onto something real? Or is this one of those theories that sounds compelling right up until you look at it too closely? I'd genuinely like to know what you think, because I'm not fully certain myself. Put your take in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this made you look at that famous golden face a little differently, send it to someone who's only ever heard the quantum scan version. Shadow discovery. The truth lies in the shadows.